The following video will be partially a critique of someone's YouTube channel, and spoiler alert, I wonder if some of the YouTube channels up there are either number stations, pieces of ARGs, or just video embeds for some website that did these as literally just artwork for some external project, which I have done in the past. That's originally what got me interested in YouTube and Google at all. That and making an online virtual operating system out of it, which Google at one time did. I have a web page where Google OS was a web-based operating system. All you needed was a computer that could access the internet, and they were trying for that. And then they threw it out because it was too useful. All the potential of the internet just shat upon because of advertisement. Anyway, let's move on. I'm going to be talking about Google Earth and Google Maps as being really just the same kind of technology, but not really. Warning, spoiler, etc. They're not satellite views; they're aerial views with aerial photography. Yeah, it's not satellite views. The satellite views do exist, but they're not down to that resolution. Okay? Don't care if you like it. Just next thing. Google Earth is a lot older than you know because it wasn't Google Earth. It's an acquired product. Here we go. In the extreme late 90s, a gaming tech company called Intrinsic Graphics started making video game assets and files and who knows what else to make Earth, to make mapping data, to use it as cumulative data that they could chop up and use for maps. I've done the same thing. One of my favorite things in Unreal Engine, specifically Unreal Engine 1 and 2, was to import height map data and the graphics from, geodata, not Google Earth, but Google gets a hold of it from the same sources, and use it to build maps that were one-to-one scale of islands. That's one of the reasons I'm so off on a tangent when it comes to Rust Legacy, is because originally I was beguiled by looking at oddly enough, a Unity demo called Paradise Island, which was an island mapped almost the same way. But let's move on. This gaming tech company, Intrinsic Graphics, in the year 1999, created a company called Keyhole Inc. that sold Keyhole EarthViewer. It was on a CD, and it required a payment and a subscription and a login and a password, and it used a web-based kind of interface in it, along with files it had for the bulk of the work. And it would just grab images from any part of the world you were looking at and just download them on the fly and leave them in a cache. I actually think I had a copy of this to play with at one time. Anyway, that's literally Y2K era, okay? I mean, I was working in a shop at the time, putting in the little real-time clock add-ons for your computers so that they wouldn't freak out and the world would come to an end. Go look it up, it's hilarious. Anyway, this was then made a 2011 version and initial release Google-branded WorldViewer by June 10th, 2001. The Y2K era was over and we were going to have, dynamic real maps. Now, at the time, again, even that would have required a payment or subscription or a login, or you would have paid initially for the CD, etc. To this day, I don't know that you can download this software at all. And it used the Keyhole file format, which is now used for virtually all mapping. They accidentally invented basically a way that worked and would work over the internet for mapping the Earth and collaboratively including data. That was done a lot by Google until they kiboshed that because, again, it was useful and they had to kill it for some reason because Google. But anyway, in 2003, now remember at that moment, in the year 2001, technically, kind of, sort of, June 10th, there was a Google-branded product that was a kind of initial release that's muttered about on Wikipedia and some blogs, but I can't find any more information at it. But technically it existed because Google got their grubby hands on a CD and wanted to acquire the company by 2001, obviously. By 2003, Intrinsic Graphics was sold to a company called Vicarious Visions. That sounds like something I'd make up if I was trying to hide what I was doing for real in the business world. Anyway, and then by 2004, Google acquired Keyhole Incorporated and all their products. And by October, they were in October. But a few months later, in 2005, very early, like February, the first full release as Google Earth happened, and other core technology got integrated instead into Google Maps as a web-based one. And now we have only now, relatively recently, in the last few years, a Google Earth as a web-based thing. And that was on February 8th. The announcement was made on Google's blog about Google Maps. So by 2005, halfway through or whatever, both products were fully realized. But the first product, oddly enough, which I was aware of, but I didn't realize what the time range was, Google Earth, a product you downloaded that would grab the data, was released technically first. There was beta testing, and there was integrating with other products, and there was proprietary software sold to the U.S. military, and blah, blah, blah. And it was featured heavily on CNN and other news sources during a particular war. You can look that up on Wikipedia's article. But were you able to get information earlier than that? Originally, Google Earth and Google Maps, like every other product, included very old data because they could get a hold of very old images. That and the fact that the U.S. military and many other governments, because you had to go to other governments, wouldn't release current data for, tactical reasons or legal reasons or privacy reasons or just made-up reasons or no reasons. But you could get a hold of this and fill in the map. They spent a long time filling in the map with any data they could and then knitting it together so the roads would line up, because if you're not aware of it, a schematic representation of a city doesn't have to look like the city or the roads. As long as the roads connect to each other between cities, it's okay if they're wrong by a specific amount. If you give good mileage between them, it's okay if the map is kind of warped and distorted. It's going to be because that's the way the Earth is shaped. It's not flat. Or is it perfectly round? Although it's virtually perfectly round. This was easier than getting new data, and new data wasn't necessary. So they would label correctly images from a long time before the product existed. This made it usable and also made it look good and also made it something people wanted to use. Google Earth and Google Maps, old imagery, has always existed by nature of how you would do this. In fact, maps you use currently, honestly, some of them just contain really old imagery with very small amounts of markup data. This is also the reason you get weird things like a literal hole on a side of a mountain, because it was only imaged by a plane from one angle. Or in the rare cases it's really a satellite image, the satellite wasn't able to get the other side of the mountain. This happens a lot on tall mountains. I mean, really it does. Look at the Andes and everywhere else on the planet. Anything looking north, anything shadowed north or south will have a hole in it if you look at certain years. Hence the reason for one of the scary videos one person uploaded. But, yes, technically by the year 2001, mid-year, there was technically, kinda, in existence, a EarthViewer that was technically spherical and also a technically flat one, depending on the mode, that you could say was Google's, because, again, they took the software off a CD and bought access to the service and might have actually given it out a little bit cheaper or not. I don't know. And again, I can't find any definitive data on it. But definitively by the year 2005, Google Earth and Google Maps fully existed. And someone then said, early 2000s, Google Earth or Google Maps didn't exist. I'm rolling this together with other comments I've heard all over the years. Very few people actually say anything about this because, again, I thought it was understood, but obviously it isn't, that you're going to find imagery from like the 1940s in some of the Google Earth maps, specifically because it has a little time change thing. Originally, Google Maps, the web-based one, would let you go forwards and backwards in time for a huge amount of time changes. You could look at the changes in New York City from the oldest aerial images from, like, I think the 1930s were included at one point for some parts of it, and go forward and back and look at what little we had. You could also had another mode that was I saw it for a week, where you could tell it to get rid of anything that isn't from that year. So you'd see how sparse and patchworky the aerial maps were, and then when satellites came out, you'd see the satellite images covered everything, but it was blurry. So you'd zoom in on New York, and everything was a blur around it. Then when you told it to fill it back in, now you saw all the hard work they did knitting it together. Now it's done automatically because they have newer data. But again, they started off with old, World War II maps that were done by aerial work. That means you get strips where you could see the plane flying through that were in high res, and everything else was low res, but for some reason, color. And you had to be able to select back and forth. So the early versions of this acknowledged how old the images were, just like they do now. And you could enable and disable things on the web-based version and also the downloaded version of what was, at one time, just a keyhole keyhole mapping system, or a keyhole, Keyhole, I forgot the name of it already, and I just said it a little while ago. Keyhole EarthViewer, and then also Google EarthViewer, or whatever it's called. And now it's gone full circle. It's all HTML and Java and JavaScript and blah, 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 and that's how we do it. Okay? And it's such a universal format that it's used by default to give the indications of where everything on the planet is, which means if somebody puts some effort into it, even an area that has some sort of rule of law preventing you from taking imagery and having it visible outside of, let's say, China, that's defeated entirely by somebody with a drone and a GPS circuit on it, which has happened enough that China has gotten very furious about it. And a lot of companies will buy the mapping code to use on their website and then say, we promise we won't let people see it, and then they use it anyway for newscasts and stuff and show very high accuracy maps that are recent. So let's get to the YouTube channel that I'm kind of review here at the 12-minute mark, and it's one of many examples of I don't know what it is, but I'll describe it. There's a YouTube user known on here as Tony Dyerker 8612. That's what it says on the channel. It has 200 some odd subs, 200 some odd vids, and 154,000 views. All since 2013 when the channel started. In fact, it started just before the release of Rust Legacy originally. Just because I'm obsessed with it. Anyway, 60,000 views of that 154,000 is a 2019 video, one video. Most of the rest of the views were from 2016. And comments have disabled on all of the uploads. And this channel uploads some very short cryptic videos and some very long ones of entire performances and sometimes cartoons. The short ones include Google Earth images and Google Map images they look like something out of an ARG or something else where it would be just embedded on someone's site. The other option is that these were originally longer videos, and this was the intro, and they chopped off everything after, let's say, 5 seconds, because they're just deleting the video, but they're keeping the views. That makes sense. I've done that on a couple of channels when I was threatened with shutdown by just taking the intro or the last part of the video and making that preserved for a bunch of videos that were considered objectionable by YouTube and Google standards, and then just remade them and then re-uploaded them. But I left the videos there after archiving them and getting rid of anything they might complain about so that they couldn't flag me, but it would still have technically the video there showing that it did in fact exist, get a bunch of views, had a bunch of commentary, and then I put in it, see also this video, a remake of it with more updated data. Also, I did that not just because I was threatened with shutdown, but because the video had useful information in it, but it wasn't presented properly. But I don't know what's going on with this channel, because it'll have an image of a misspelled 2003 elementary school without any latitude and longitude, so that we can find out what it really points at. And it's a 2019 video about Google Earth or Google Maps implying something, and there's nothing in it. Most of the videos are completely silent, or if they have any sounds in the background, they're disassociated. So someone asked me to point out to this person, quote-unquote, Google Earth and or Google Maps, depending on what you're talking about, didn't exist in early 2000s. One of them did, Google Earth, technically. But what became Google Earth did exist, but it was a subscription CD thing you had to pay for. And I can't even find the pricing for it. But yeah, by 2005, they both existed. That's it. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. I hope this has been useful to clear up any questions about whether or not Google Earth and Google Maps existed before 2005. One of them, yes. The other, not necessarily.